Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer Fox with Fox Property Management, and I have Catherine Davis with Allstate Insurance with me today. And I'm excited to have her having a conversation with us because, as property managers, we are not experts in insurance, but we know that you need it, and we know that renters need it, and we know that coverage is super, super important. It's one of the most traumatizing moments is when something happens at your property and you don't have the right insurance. And so, wanted to bring Catherine on today to talk about the landlord side of insurance, the tenant side of insurance, and also take it one level further since we're talking a lot about furnished rentals and Sundance and that opportunity about what sort of coverage you might want to consider if you're going to rent your house out for Sundance or just short term, midterm in general. So I thought we'd start with at least getting to know Catherine a little bit. So Catherine, maybe you could talk about your agency, talk about how you got into it, why you still love it. Tell us a little bit about
You
yourself.
think I still love it? No,
Yes.
I'm kidding. I still love it. So I've been doing it 23 years. We had celebrated 23 years on August 1st. And I got started with it because I am an investment advisor by trade. So that's what I was doing. And then got into insurance because you can help so many more people. And like the kind of things that you could do to make sure people are covered and that they have good insurance. And why am I still interested in doing it today, and why do I still like it? It's essentially it's that it goes back to that, and I want to reference like the Marshall Fire, which obviously was a
Right.
the biggest catastrophic thing that happened in Colorado. That's when we were on stage, and like what Allstate was able to do, and what insurance companies, how they showed up for their clients. That's really when I felt like how valuable what we do is for a living. Like what,
Yeah.
it's not just hey, let's slap a policy together, and then like it really meant something then because like what people had to rebuild their houses, they lost everything, and all of a sudden people figured out what they needed to have and that they didn't have. As you know, Jen, most people were underinsured.
Right.
And do you know why?
Maybe because they hadn't talked to their agent in a long time and they just hadn't reviewed their policy.
Yep.
Is that
Because, and I can tell you, most people don't do an annual review.
Yeah.
Because it's just insurance, right? And we'll talk
Right.
through. I'm going to bring up later how it's just insurance. But it's also because people want the cheapest policy.
Oh, right.
And so
Yeah.
when you want the cheapest policy, you don't have the best coverages. And then when your house burns down and you're trying to rebuild it, it's a problem. So
Yeah.
the Marshall Fire, I think it taught me a lot, taught my staff a lot. And and so now we're trying to make sure we relay that. And it's not just now. I mean, we've always been, as an agency, important to us to put people in the right coverages so that if you do have a catastrophe happen, you're covered properly.
Yeah.
It's what we say is you want the best coverage for the best price instead of just people saying, I just want the best price, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is you all know, like you get what you pay for, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, so interesting. So what were, that was a lot of homeowners living in their homes with their normal homeowner coverage that you were managing, right? So Fox Property Management, just so people know, we manage over 1,400 doors, and many of them are in Louisville in that area. We only lost one house to that fire.
Wow.
We had quite a few with smoke damage, and then of course, if people remember, right after the fire, we then had freezing temperatures but no power, and so then the next issue we had was flooding. And burst pipes. Water intrusion.
Pipes
So
burst. Yeah.
yeah,
pipes
so
freezing.
so huge nightmare, and so we know how important insurance is. But there's both what you do for your homeowners, but then there's being a landlord, and that's a big focus for us, right? And so a lot of what I want to talk about today is, like this is what exactly is landlord insurance? How is it different than homeowners insurance?
So the biggest difference is a homeowner's policy covers the house itself and everything inside of it, as opposed to a landlord policy only covers really the structure. Right.
Okay.
So with homeowners insurance, what we say is if you flip the house and you shook it, everything that falls is personal property.
Okay.
So think about it as if we shook your rental house, everything that falls is not covered by your landlord policy.
Okay, so we're assuming basically that's where the tenant has to insure themselves.
Yep. So
Okay.
then that's renter's insurance.
Okay.
Is what falls out when we shake the house upside down.
Right.
That's renter's insurance.
So if you're getting a landlord policy, and someone's coming to you for a landlord policy, are you requiring that they have tenants with a tenant policy? That a renter's policy also, is that a requirement of landlord tenant?
It is not. That's a great
Okay.
question because it's something I like to touch
Okay.
on a lot. So most landlords do not require renter's insurance, but
Okay.
that's what you're asking, right?
Well, that's what I was wondering is when you're giving someone a policy, do you say, yes, we will honor this policy, but your tenant must have renter's insurance, not
So
required.
no
Okay,
insurance companies require that landlords require their tenants to have insurance.
Perfect.
But
Okay.
they should. But landlords should. And be careful, landlords, when you get offered and tenants, right? Sometimes tenants will go rent from an apartment building or somewhere and they'll be told, "Oh yeah, we have renter's insurance," but all it really covers is the property.
The
It
liability.
doesn't your stuff.
Yes.
Doesn't cover your stuff.
Yes.
Right? So you want it to cover both, right? So
Yeah. So as a landlord, as long as you have landlord insurance, it is going to cover the home. So if there is a kitchen fire, it is going to cover everything that was damaged that is attached. Is that including appliances, all of the things that came with the house? But the tenant's furniture, the tenant's clothes, the smoke damage to the tenant's belongings is not covered.
It's not covered, which we sadly learned from the Marshall Fire because the people who were renting who didn't have renter's insurance, they had nothing.
Okay. And if the tenant then has to move out, does the landlord policy cover lost rent?
Yes, that's called loss of rent.
Okay.
Or loss of rent. Yes, absolutely. So if the house is not, you're not able to rent it and you're not getting any income, and it's because, this is key, of a covered claim, right? It can't just be I can't rent it out. So
Right.
it has to be because of a covered claim. Then we pay what's called fair rental income
Okay.
to the landlord.
Okay.
So, again, one of the things that, I said that what it covers is just the house itself. It's fair rental income, like you said. Loss of income.
Okay.
Again, because the house, even if they just, I've had someone, the kitchen caught on fire, and it was a year it took for that smoke damage.
Oh, geez.
So,
okay.
So they couldn't, if you can't have a renter live in there, we will pay for the equivalent of whatever a fair rental income
Is it possible that some landlords have a landlord policy that does not have that included, and that is something that's saving them money, or is it
great question.
Is it always
It's
included?
pretty generic that it's included.
Okay.
But one of the questions I think you're going to ask me is like, what's the biggest advice? And I'm just going to say it now. Like, know your policy.
Yeah.
Like, read your policy. A lot of people think, oh, it's just, there is the myth or the misconception out there is it's just insurance, and a lot of times it's because when we set up our homeowners policy or landlord policy or renters, we're busy because we're buying a house, we are about to move into a house,
Right.
Or an apartment, right? And so we're just like, let me just sign it, whatever, and then you don't really pay attention to it, but you should do it annually as you get the renewals, because you need to know what you have covered. What are all the different things? And we'll go through some of those things today.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Liability, can I interrupt?
Oh, yeah.
The other thing that is covered by landlord policies is liability, right? So let's say you didn't fix the stairs, and as a result they fell down the stairs or steps or something.
Okay.
And then they sue you for it because, let's say that they get paralyzed because they fell down the stairs. So you have liability protection inside of your landlord policy as well. You just have to make sure it's enough. A lot of times what comes with a landlord policy is $100,000 in liability.
Okay.
If someone really truly sues you, and I highly recommend for all landlords to have an umbrella policy, because tenants like to think landlords are the big bad rich landlords, and so they they tend to be sued. Have umbrella policies which are not that expensive for $1 million and up. I would recommend that for landlords.
Okay, that's great. So so if someone just starts renting out their house, does their homeowners just convert into landlord? Do they need to call their agent and make that change?
They need to make the change, and that because it doesn't just convert, it's a completely different policy. And I will say a landlord policy also is not as rich as a homeowner's policy. A homeowner's policy has a lot of bells and whistles, a lot more coverages, and
it costs more money.
And actually landlord policies sometimes cost more.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because when you live in a home, you take care of it, right?
Yeah.
You are there to protect it. There's no, like, if there's any kind of water running, you're going to turn it off.
Yeah.
As opposed to, there's just more risk
Okay.
when you're renting it out to someone else. And as you know, people don't take care of our houses the way that we would take care of them if we lived in them.
Yeah.
So that's
it's not huge. There's not a huge discrepancy, but there is a difference in the coverage. It's really important if you're going to rent out your house that you change your policy over. So that is important.
You because and the thing to that is if you don't and you have a claim and it won't get covered if you don't have the right policy.
Don't have the right
So that's
policy.
the biggest message we're giving out to you.
Okay.
If you don't have the right policy, it's not going to be covered.
Okay. So still in this vein of landlord coverage, so what kinds of tenant-related incidents usually trigger the landlord liability claim?
It would be something like I said earlier, like it could be that the tenant's liability? Or you said landlord?
The landlord's liability.
It would be like you didn't fix something, and then as a result, the tenant got hurt. So, like stairs and steps
or some habitability issue, like the hot water heater fails and there's a water thing, or there's a sewer backup, or something habitable.
Yeah, and of course it has to be a covered. Those are two different things. Liability is different from a covered claim. Like, let's say sewer backs up into the house, that's a covered claim, right?
Okay.
But if for some reason that happens, and as a result the tenants get some sort of health condition, that would then fall under liability.
Okay, great. So like for our property management audience, what coverage gap do you often see with local landlords? Like, where's the biggest issue? Is it hail, smoke, water damage? Where are you seeing?
Those are all covered except for the last one. Hail, smoke, fire, all that. That's all covered by your landlord policy.
Okay.
But what is not necessarily covered, this is where you want to have a good conversation with your insurance agent, is things like water backup, right?
Okay.
Service lines. So they're not necessarily in the policy. You got to add them.
What about mold?
Mold, we don't like mold. Insurance companies do not like mold. So I will say, just homeowners as well as landlords, if you have a leak, you want to take care of it as soon as possible, because if it molds, that means you didn't so insurance is all about sudden and accidental.
Right.
So if you say, oh, I have mold because something has been leaking for months, it's not sudden and accidental, then it's not covered. And we don't like mold. And mold develops because you didn't tend to it right away.
That's right.
That's not covered.
Okay, so if you were to give landlords, because we're going to move on now, you're going to give landlords like the piece of advice that's most important for a landlord that you want to leave them with.
I would say make sure your tenants have renter's insurance. And I'm going to tell you why. It sounds obvious. Oh, so that they don't because they need they need coverage for their clothes and their furniture. But really, as a landlord, the reason you want them to have renter's insurance is you want them to have that liability portion of it. You don't really care. That's what you care about, because if something were to happen to the house, they accidentally burn it, or intentionally, let's hope not, right? Accidentally or intentionally burn it, or for whatever it is that they do, or water leak, they let something leak for months, right? And then all of a sudden you got a whole problem with the house. More than so what happens in that scenario is your insurance company will go after your tenant. If they don't have that liability portion, and I always say, by the way, the liability amount of your tenant's renter's insurance should be the amount it costs for you to rebuild your house.
Geez. Okay. That's not common with most of the liability only. So there's some interesting rules around what you can demand a tenant will do. With Fox, we have a liability only policy that we sign them up for immediately, and that only goes away if they show us they have renter's insurance. But most renter's insurance policies do not exceed $300,000.
Yes, most of them are actually done with $100,000,
right?
Because that's what the cookie cutter product is, right? And so $300,000 or $500,000 sometimes is the max. That's where, if you're renting a house for $1 million as a tenant, if a tenant's listening to this, you want to have that. By the way, it's so cheap to have to increase your liability insurance, because should you accidentally burn the house, they're going to go after, the insurance company will go after you, the tenant, right? So as a landlord, I have an example about but that I'll tell you guys about in Boulder that was in a condo. But that is my biggest advice to landlords is to make sure your renters have renters insurance and that their liability is it's as a lot of times it's only 100,000, but you really want it to be as high as possible. Jen, I have some rental properties.
Yeah.
I have different requirements depending on the value of the house, or not the value,
Right.
but the replacement value.
Yeah, and there are some limitations that landlords can have. Okay, so the landlords can't make certain demands. So we also have to. The idea
That are
is
state laws,
yes,
right?
that so what we want to make sure of is that tenants have coverage to protect themselves. Owners have coverage. So to me, for you landlords, know what your policy is. Be aware of your policy. Make sure that you have coverage that really would cover the replacement of your house. And also that you have lost rent coverage. You say it's cookie cutter and usually in there, but like make sure you know your policy. That's like super, super important. And then what you can rely on our side is that we're going to make sure they have the basic liability coverage, and we are going to encourage inside of the rules and regulations we work inside of that they have the greatest amount of coverage to protect themselves as well. And so I think, as we move into the renter insurance, questions, we can maybe answer some of those. So as we move into renter's insurance, what does a renter's insurance policy cover that people don't expect in property and liability?
It's the liability.
Okay, so it's just the liability. Unless...
Because most people know renter's insurance will cover my stuff.
Yeah.
Inside the house, inside the condo.
Right.
But the liability is what they don't think about.
Okay.
And I've had tenants that were C-level people that understood it the minute I said, hey, you need your liability to cover the house itself should it accidentally burn. And they're like, oh yeah. They actually, when... they understood that they need to get that covered so that they're not the ones paying to rebuild the house.
Right. Well, and I think part of it too is helping people understand, like, if they use the liability only insurance through Fox right now, through our Appfolio, it's not us. It costs them $15 a month, right, for over $100,000 worth of liability coverage. Insurance is not that expensive.
It's not.
And so I think that's another thing is to be really helping tenants understand that, right?
I think one of the things we were going to talk about is renter's insurance is so cheap. It can be as cheap as $10-15 a month, and it would include the 100,000 plus the stuff that you have inside. So I think it's great that you guys are automatically protecting your landlords at Fox Property, and by providing that, because then there, no matter what, there's $100,000 protection for your landlords, but tenants should also think about their own stuff that they need to they should insure.
And we hope that they go, we don't make money off this policy. We just sign them up on it to protect everyone, and we hope they get their own renter's insurance. Let's see. So I do have this question. If a tenant does damage, I'll give you a story. We had a townhome, it was 3 stories. Tenant used the restroom in the middle of the night. The toilet didn't flush completely, it overflowed. And so all night long, water was trickling down 3 levels of this townhome. Okay? In that moment, the tenant didn't do anything on purpose. It was accidental, right? There was maybe a failure of a system. They went back to sleep, so they didn't intentionally miss it. Right? In this particular case, the tenant's liability coverage covered the whole thing.
Good.
But would you recommend that landlords put their coverage up for this, or do you recommend that they wait and see about the tenant's coverage first, or what's your recommendation?
I would try to get the tenant's coverage to cover it, because think about it this way: when you're in a car accident, if you hit me, right? Your insurance should pay for my damages.
Right.
The same thing, like it's because it's your fault.
Right.
If it's the tenant's fault, you want the claim to be paid by the tenants
First.
Yeah, first. If they don't have any, then you can go to your own.
Yeah.
Because also you're subject to your deductible, right? So then you have money out of pocket if you're doing it out of your own policy.
Yeah.
As well as now you have a claim on your record. Your insurance rates are going to go up next year, and so on and so on.
Yeah. Okay, so I think what seems to be the message when it comes to renters and renters insurance is there are limits to what we can force renters to do. Landlords need to have coverage to protect your asset, and you need to make sure you understand that. We are always encouraging tenants to have coverage to protect their assets, right? Their personal belongings and liability to protect themselves. So we are working hard on that. And so we can, any tenant that might watch this, get renter's insurance, cover. It's also interesting because I remember my insurance also covering, like, if I had a bike stolen.
Yep.
Right? So
Yeah.
other personal, like, things you don't think about.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, it's good coverage.
Not e-bikes, though. E-bikes have to be insured because they are motorized.
Oh, interesting.
They are not covered. ATVs, people think ATVs, snowmobiles, because they're inside the house, that they're covered by their renters or their homeowners
But if
policy.
they're motorized, they have to have a different coverage.
Yes. It's not, yeah.
Oh,
So but e-bikes is the one that most people miss because it's a bike. We think of it as a bike, but
that's
it's not.
interesting.
It's an e-bike. You got to go get a different insurance for it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to jump into this idea of this insurance for short-term and furnished rentals because so we have this whole new world happening right in our area, Boulder and surrounding areas with Sundance coming to town, and we have both. Landlords or owner-occupied properties that can be rented for either short-term rentals or the event license, which is the 29 days, and all these people are like working on, okay, what am I going to do? How do I prepare my house? And what are all the things I need to do? And what's my insurance if I'm on Airbnb versus all these sort of things, right? So they're thinking ahead. So the question is, if someone is going to rent their primary home for 29 days throughout the year, and they're going to list it on Airbnb or they're going to list it through us and we're going to manage it for them, what do they need to do about their homeowner's insurance?
They need to add short-term rental coverage to their homeowner's insurance. It's not an a la carte coverage that you go online, that you just buy separately. It gets added to your existing homeowner's policy. I believe most cities in Colorado, when you apply for your short-term rental license, are wanting that coverage, wanting proof.
They're asking?
The town of Superior wants it when you apply. They want to see it. I know that they also want it to be an annual coverage just because Sundance is only in January. They don't want it to be off in February and then back on again. Because I think it's because they can't police it.
Yeah.
I don't know if Boulder is the same way.
Okay.
But so you need to make sure that you add that coverage.
Okay.
And then also make sure you see it in writing, right? Because if you call your company, and especially if it's an 800 number that you call and that guy tells you it's covered, but you don't have it in writing, you just want to make sure you have it in writing. Yeah, especially if a lot of times they have to add that coverage, right? It's not just part of the policy. And some of the older policies, so I'm going to give this advice to everybody that's listening. Some of the older policies, if you've had a policy for a long time with the same company, will probably not have a short-term rental option.
It's a newer thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not newer. Like, we've had Airbnb and VRBO a long time.
Yeah.
But it is newer that, right, short-term rentals are newer. So just make sure if you have an older policy, you double, triple check that. And of course, the reason is if you don't have that coverage and you have a claim, it won't be covered.
Okay. So, all right. So we know Allstate has this coverage.
Yes.
But does everybody have this coverage? Is this a pretty standard coverage?
No.
Okay, so it's really important that that you.
And then again, also if you have an older policy, even for us, our older older. If you've had your policy for 40 years, we don't have it as something we can add. We have to put you in the new policy.
In a new policy to be able to add it. Okay, so this is an important thing that if you are thinking about renting here's the thing. It's an opportunity, right? Is I may or may not rent my house out, for Sundance. But either way, I'm going to call my insurance agent, call Catherine and get an estimate. I'm going to make sure that the coverage on my house is good for me. It's also set up properly if I rent it, and I'm going to give that some time and attention so that I know I'm covered. So it's just a smart thing to do, right?
Yeah, it's just really smart to do it ahead of time and learn about it ahead of time. One other thing about short-term rental coverage is that you can't buy, I don't know if you can buy it a la carte, but a lot of the towns in Colorado and cities are not accepting online policies. Like if you just want to buy it separately, they're like, nope, you can't. We want it to be part of your homeowner's policy.
Okay. Interesting.
They don't want any online.
Interesting.
Online.
But this is the whole thing, right? Is that the worst surprise ever is to find out in a moment of crisis that you don't have the right coverage. So
whether it's Sundance or the Marshall Fire or
So the advice here is it costs you nothing to get in touch with your agent or call somebody to talk through your coverage and make sure that what you've got is actually sufficient. And then you can have these coverage conversations. Do I have the right umbrella policy? Do I have the right landlord policy? If it's a, but whatever you would say, it's a good thing to review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk, I kind of want to give an example real quick.
Okay.
Like to piggyback on what you're saying on like how important it is to know what your coverages are, because most people, like I said, just don't pay that much attention to their insurance. It's just you're buying a house, you're so busy with all that, you're moving, you're getting a loan, and then you're just like, oh, you just let your current agent put together whatever they put together, right? But here's the deal. We're going to take $1 million just because it's easy math. So let's say you have a $1.3 million house. We're going to insure it for about $1 million because we don't have to insure the land. It doesn't burn, doesn't go away. Okay. Right. So, and because you live, depending on the city you live, the value of your home is going to be more than the replacement cost. Right. Okay. So we insure it for $1 million for easy math. Okay. So $1 million plus what comes with that policy is an automatic about 70% for personal property, the stuff inside the house. So right off the bat, in a Marshall Fire situation, we paid $1.7 million with this example.
For everything.
Just for those two things. No. We're not even done yet. Okay. Because after that, there's extended protection, building codes coverage. God, what is it called? We had to clean up all the debris removal, all of that. In this example, we ended up paying about $2.2 million total.
On $1 million coverage.
On $1 million coverage. On a $1.3 million house. So it's actually, I make a point of saying your insurance coverage is actually worth more than your house. Does that make sense?
If you have the right coverage.
Yes, if you have the right coverage. I'm going to let that sink in. But even if you are undercovered, you're probably, let's say you only insured your house for $750,000, we're still going to pay about $1.5 million on that. Just all in, all the stuff that is included in your coverage. So I say this because when people don't take our call when we say, hey, can we do an annual review? Oh my gosh, can I talk about renovations real quick? I'm like going off topic.
Yes, but finish that sentence. When people don't take your call.
Yeah, well, I will tell you statistically only about 5 to 10% of our clients, we have about 3,500 clients, households, take the opportunity to review their policies. After the Marshall Fire, we got about a 60%, people reviewed their policies, increased their coverages and all that. Now we're back to 5 to 10% again. And then they say to us, we actually had got a call after the Marshall Fire, why is my house only insured for $400,000? It's worth X. It's worth $1 million is exactly what the guy said. It didn't burn, but he's just upset at us. I'm like, well, we don't know how much your house is worth. Right, we don't daily look at, or especially because the last time he did a review with us was 4 years ago. So it's so important that you do those annual reviews, but also you pay attention to what you have, because you know what I say, Jen, is if I gave you, in that scenario, I said we're going to pay out about $2.1 million. If I gave you $2.1 million and told you just to invest it with somebody online and never talk to anybody again, would you do that? You wouldn't do that. You would take care of that $2.1 million, at least talk about it and review it once a year.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that's the thing is I think we just forget. I mean, I'm thinking about myself right now, and I know, when was the last time I reviewed?
We need a review.
Right, that's right.
Renovations. So I'm just renovations, talking to landlords right now, or homeowners. If you do a renovation, please increase your coverage. Oh, right. You know how much you're increasing, you're putting a $50,000 kitchen. Landlords, renovate all the time. Yeah. And don't do it at the end. Because we had a client, we lost 52 homes in the Marshall Fire, and we had about 400 smoke damage. So one of the homes that we lost, they did hundreds of thousands of renovations. It was one of those where they bought it, they knew they were going to do a bunch, and then they were going to move into it. Well, it burned before they finished. So and they had already put $500,000. Oh, gosh. Yeah. And they said, well, my recommendation is, if you know how much you're going to spend, you should add that at the beginning. Why try to save the money for 3 months? Just add it to your policy at the beginning, because you never know. And there's a myth, and that happened during the Marshall Fire, that people think that, but if, the builder's rebuilding my house, they have insurance, I don't need to have insurance, right? I don't need to cover myself because they have insurance. Yeah. But if that house burns, not because of the builder's fault, you have to have coverage.
Right.
So same thing with renovations.
Things
If
to think
during
about.
renovation something happens, it's not the builder that's gonna
Right.
redo the kitchen again.
Yeah.
They're not gonna pay for it again.
Right.
It has to be
Interesting.
out of your own pocket or
Yeah.
insurance.
So for you landlords, that's for your primary home in most cases, and also could be for your rental if you are doing a bunch of work to it.
Yeah, and
So
your renovations, and you know exactly how much you're spending, so you know how much to add.
Yeah. Let's see. It seems to me, I was going to ask you like what steps or paperwork or what people need to do, but the truth is, if they're going to rent their primary home out short term or in a event license sort of thing, it's just like everything we've been saying. Call your agent
And it's super simple.
and just to have a conversation about what you're going to be doing. Make sure your house has the right coverage. Make sure that you've got the right coverage and the appropriate coverage.
Yeah, the right rider, right? That you have the short-term rental rider, and make sure you get it in writing. And it's super simple. It should not be more than a 5-10 minute, depending on how many questions you have, but it should be maybe a 10-minute conversation. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I am going to, let's see. I'm going to ask you some questions for quick answers as we start to, wrap
Rapid
up
fire.
here. Yeah. So, okay. So, my tenant's renter's insurance covers my building if there's a fire. True or false?
My tenant, say that again?
My tenant's renter's insurance.
No,
So I'm a landlord.
false.
That's false. Okay. What's the truth?
Your tenant's renter's insurance doesn't cover the building. You landlords cover the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about if it's their fault? If it's the tenant's fault?
Then it's the tenant's
Then it's the tenant's liability.
Yep.
Okay, so basically liability. But if there's a fire in the building, or there's a fire someone else, fire that is not the tenant's fault, it will come from your landlord policy. Mm-hmm. Okay. If I only rent my house out for a few weekends a year, I don't need to tell my insurer. We just discussed this.
False.
Yeah, right. So it's just not worth it, because when you're not in your house and someone else is probably the most likely time that something weird could happen.
Yeah,
So
the
just
thing
get the
about
coverage,
insurance is a lot of people say it's not likely going to happen, right? But until we had the Marshall Fire, we all thought no, it's not likely going to happen. It's not likely you're going to be in a car accident today. But when it happens, you just want to make sure you have the right coverage.
So Airbnb has insurance coverage too, but I don't know the extent of their coverage. But Airbnb insurance coverage alone is not enough. That's covering like damage to couches and damage to the inside and damage to your personal belongings.
Or they steal something.
Right. But it's not the appropriate coverage.
Right.
Okay. All right, let's see. Landlord insurance covers my tenant's furniture and belongings. False, right? Because we had that conversation. If you turn the house over and shake it, the landlord, it's only covering what's attached.
Yeah, what doesn't fall.
Yeah.
Which means,
although
your kitchen cabinets.
Your refrigerator could fall.
Okay.
But
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because you had kind of said something about that. Mm-hmm. That's personal property. So we covered it's going to cover the house. It's a structure, and what else did we say it covers? Loss of income.
Yeah.
Is that right? Liability. The other thing you actually have with your landlord policy is a very small portion of personal property.
Okay.
The example I gave you earlier, it was going to be $700,000. Most of the time, it's very minimal what your personal property is. But your personal property coverage on your landlord policies should include the refrigerator, if you're including the washer dryer, dishwasher, appliances, and washer dryer. Appliances basically, because they do fall. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So you'll have, depending on what your appliances are, $5,000 to $20,000 of personal property.
Awesome.
So don't forget that. Do not delete that part.
But make sure it's in your policy. All right, let's see. All insurance agents sell the same landlord policy, so price is the only thing that matters.
False. Thank you for setting me up. A lot of landlord. This is a good time for me to talk about that. A lot of landlord policies are they're very basic, and this isn't insurance wide. So they're not as deep and rich as our homeowners policies, where we have a lot more bells and whistles and things that we can add that are included in a homeowner's policy. That's why landlords need to pay more attention about what else can I add to it. And if you have an old landlord policy, and I say this because we just came out with a new landlord policy, and it acts and smells and looks a lot like our homeowner's policy with the same bells and whistles. Our old one doesn't. It's very basic. But that's what landlord policies tend to be. Very basic. No water backup, no extended protection,
Okay.
no service lines. So the newer policies, as a matter of fact, one of the things we're doing at the office right now is trying to rewrite everybody to the new policy because it's richer.
It's better.
Richer, it's better. It's
Can I ask about that? You were here for the 2013 floods, right?
Yes.
Okay. That was unbelievable. And one of the most challenging parts about it, when I remember, is that most people did not have coverage in their primaries or their rentals for groundwater.
For ground, when you say
and
groundwater, water coming,
coming in.
Yeah, so
Is there
water
coverage
coming
for that?
in, it's a flood policy.
Okay.
Because water coming in from the outside is considered flood.
Okay.
And it's not covered by
Right.
a regular policy.
So how important do you think that is? I mean, that was a 100-year flood, right? We don't get a lot of flooding here. How important do you think that is for landlords with a single family home?
It depends on where it is. If
Okay.
it's in a floodplain, how, there's different ratings on if you're in a floodplain, like how likely, whether it's 100 years or
Okay.
50 years or 20 years.
Okay.
But most of the time, if you have a mortgage, they will mandate that you need.
If you are in a flood zone. Okay.
They'll mandate flood insurance.
Just one more thing to think about.
Yeah, but most of us don't have it, and did you know also that flood insurance is actually, we resell it, all of us that sell it, whether it's State Farm, Allstate, we resell it through FEMA. It's really a FEMA
interesting.
product, and it's limited. I think it's still only at 250,000 that they cover.
Okay.
It's limited, but it is all, we just resell it for FEMA.
So I think
fun facts.
I think
See?
when we get to, I think the general gist of this whole conversation is that insurance is a very proprietary and specific to your property type of thing that you need to be paying attention to. And as your property managers, we can't do it for you. And we're definitely not the experts. So we can't really advise you. So we're always going to refer you to your agent or to an agent to discuss. And so this is just another opportunity to remind you that this is something you need to review. You review it for yourself for your primary, review it for your rental. Have a conversation with your asset manager if you're wondering what sort of coverage your tenant has. Like, did they get renter's insurance? What's their liability? Are they using our, kind of in-house liability coverage through our software? You find out so you just know what's happening and that you know what your options are so that if something happens, this is a time I'm going to use my policy, this is not. And keeping in mind, if your tenant finds a leak or there's mold and it's been leaking in a place that no one has seen and it's been going on for months, that's not going to be covered by insurance because it's not an accident.
It's not sudden.
It's not sudden and
accidental.
And so it's a completely different thing. And so I think it catches a lot of us up,
And on
off
that
guard.
note, if I can just kind of whisper this into there, when you guys are talking to claims adjusters, don't use the word leak ever.
Okay.
Even leak is like a 4-letter word that insurance doesn't like.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Don't use the word leak.
Or mold. Don't even like if you think there might be mold, don't say that. You just leave that out of the conversation.
Let them figure that out. It's not deceptive. It's more that it doesn't help them decide how they're going to cover it if you are giving them information that you may not even know. You may not even had a mold test yet. So you may not know if there's mold. So you just want to what we want to do is be very thoughtful that when something happens, we have the right people evaluating it, have insurance look at it, and that we, we hope in most cases it's going to be covered. So
the
is there anything else you'd add?
Yeah, the thing I would add too is that people always say, isn't that why I have insurance? Because they want everything paid by insurance, especially landlords. Be careful because if you own one or several properties, you also, of course, own your home likely. So you don't want to accumulate a bunch of claims because if you do, your premiums go up and eventually you get canceled. But insurance is not for anything and everything that breaks. I think you know that, or anything that everything.
It's more for catastrophic. It's more for big things.
It's more
I
for
think
big
that's
things.
a really important. When you submit a claim and the right way and what not to do, because I've heard you talk about this before, like don't call and submit a claim when you maybe don't want to submit a claim.
When you don't know
you don't know yet.
Or if it's covered.
Yeah, because so you should call your agent. Don't go online and submit a claim without calling your agent, because there are times where even if the claim isn't actually executed, it still sits on your record that you called in a claim. And so it's really, really important. I think this kind of reminds us as a final note is like, it's important to have a relationship with your insurance agent. That's bottom line.
That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But so, because you want to call them before you file a claim, because your local. That's why I'm very big on local, right? Have a local agent, that not an 800 number that you call, because then that way because when you call that 800 number, even Allstate, 1-800 Allstate, you call them and you have a claim question, they're going to open that claim. But if you call your local agent, they can give you advice. Because what if I just gave someone $1,300 to get the other person's car repaired? Well, their deductible was $1,000. Yeah. And had he just called, right, they would have just opened that claim, and we would have paid $300. It's not worth it, because his rate's going to go up $280 a year for the next 5 years. So So
getting advice from your agent. So
getting a local agent.
Yeah. So I hope this is helpful. I think there was a ton of stuff we talked about. I think we all basically got from this is that Fox Property Management, we're not experts in insurance. Catherine Davis at Allstate is.
Call me.
Yeah, and so call the experts, talk it through, make sure that you're covered, so that you can kind of have some peace of mind. And I think that's what we know insurance is, right? And you can pay insurance your whole life and never use it. But when you have insurance and the time comes that you need it, it's the greatest gift that you've given yourself, right? So I think that's
like a sigh.
Yeah. I think that's what I want to leave you with is it's like it's a really important part of being a landlord. And you can take this knowledge and use it for your primary and think about it in other situations. But as a landlord, make sure you have the right policy to cover your home, so that the renters, basically can live in a house that's covered, and that you have peace of mind that if anything happens, you have the right coverage, and that you aren't going to have additional hardship on top of the inconvenience of having your property damaged. So
in addition, to make sure that you're I highly recommend that you have your renters have renters insurance. Your tenants should have renters insurance.
Yeah. And so we will do everything we can to help encourage that and make sure that there's as much coverage as possible, and also always recommend to them that they get their own policy and not use just a liability. That's always our recommendation, because again, it's the same sort of thing, right? If something happens in your home and tenants lose all their belongings and they didn't have coverage, they're just disappointed. And that's the last thing we want, right? So we want to encourage them to get the right coverage for themselves, just like we're encouraging you to have the right coverage for yourself. So thank you so much if you've listened through this conversation. We hope that it's helpful. And and I think that's it. So yeah, Catherine, thanks for jumping on with me today. And we'll see you again soon.